Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Now, as the thumbnail suggests, I really need your help. So without further ado, let's get into it and explain what I need. So as you're probably aware, building my Mazda RX4 929, whatever you want to call it, right here. And the project has stalled sort of significantly at the moment. Have been doing a little bit of work lately on it. As you can see, got the rear tires on there. They are Zestino rubber. Now, it was very hard to find any rubber in the size I needed for engineering for that, but finally got some on there. So now we have 4 wheels and 4 tires on the car, which is a long way doing that. I've started on some of the wiring. Here you can see some of the wiring for the tail lights. I want to also do the lights for headlights, all the other wiring basically. So most of the wiring's done with the Haltech and the fuses and everything like that. And this is where I really need your help. This car was sold complete, and like all project cars and cars that have been disassembled, it definitely isn't complete. And those little tiny things that don't come with a project car, when it's a car like this, you know, it's not a VT Commodore or something like that. You can just, you know, there's thousands of thousands sold and still around, you know, at wreckers or whatever. These things are really thin on the ground. So I reached out recently to get some wiring modules and stuff, and people were helpful, and I tracked down 2 of the modules. So this is a module for the horn, wipers, and the flasher relay for the indicators and that. So, and this is a module for the intermediate wipers. So what you can see here is the wiper box. You can see those 2 modules, and then you can see some wiring here off the combination switch which run to these things. Now what you can see that's missing is the wiring that goes in between here. So what I need everyone's help with is locating what is essentially the OEM front of under dash wiring harness that'll basically go between here, here, and here. Now, I could completely try and attempt to wire it all myself and, you know, sit there with the multimeter and guess and based on some wiring diagrams what goes where, but realistically with that car over there and other things I want to do on this car, if I just had an actual harness, I would be done and I'd be able to move on to the next thing. So I'm not progressing past this point until all the wiring on the car is done. So I'm not going to pull the engine out and do the 2K Barra mods to it that I need to do until the wiring is all done. So I want to 100% complete parts of the project now. I'm at that stage. So what I need is this harness. Now, I understand there's sort of 2 people that will have this harness sort of out there. There'll be the people that have one and are willing to sell it, and there are the people who have one and aren't willing to sell it, which is completely fine, I understand. So first of all, I either need a person who's willing to sell it, and be that at a reasonable price. Remember, this is a couple of plugs off a Mazda harness from a car from 50 years ago, and that it's not an XY GT, but the other person who's not willing to sell it, I understand that too. However, if you'd be willing to lend me that harness, I can easily replicate that harness in no time. So replicating a harness will take me a couple of hours, if that. Trying to do the harness from scratch and work out what wire goes where and what not, and that will take days and days, and I'm not willing to invest all of that effort into doing it. So just copy and paste will take no time. So if you actually have 929 or an RX4 and you have a harness there and your car's in the middle of being built or whatever, and you're willing to post the harness to me or something, or I can come pick it up if you're somewhere in Melbourne, and then I'll post it back to you, deliver it back to you or whatever, just so I can get this project back on the road, that would be absolutely incredible. Or if you do have one of the harnesses, you want to sell it for like, some money that's not an exorbitant amount of money, let me know too. And if you know someone that's got an RX4 or a 929 or something like this that may not see this video, please share it with them so they can be aware of the plight that I'm under here, because yeah, really, that's all that's sort of standing in my way at the moment. You can see I've run some of the wires here for the headlights and that too. So I've reached out to the engineer because obviously these headlights, you can get, these are sealed beam, and they're about half a candle watt power. They're just awful, these old 70s sort of headlights and that. So you can get semi-sealed ones where you can put like a halogen bulb in the back of them, but those bulbs, 55 watts, still take a fair few amps to drive. I'd love to put LED headlights in here where they might be, you know, 1 amp basically to run a headlight bulb or something like that. So I've reached out to the engineer to, I guess, ask his opinion on what headlights will legally be allowed to put in the car and be engineered, because you can get those eBay and Amazon ones for $100 with, you know, with the angel eyes sort of ring around them and that, but I'm sure they're not what's called, I think, ETIC sort of or something approved, which is basically legal to be used in Australia. So because this car's being engineered, I can't do certain things until the engineer says, yes, that's what you have to do. And I think they're pretty short-staffed at the moment, so just got to wait for them to reply, basically. So realistically, when you look at this car, there's not a heap left to do. It's just those little 1% things here and there that are a big pain in my sack, basically, because you just can't do anything without having them, and you can't actually easily access them. So that's a bit of a pain, but yeah, we'll get there. Started on, like I said, some of that wiring there, was doing a bit more welding just to bring the project to completion. And then of course the other thing we've got here is old mate rotary, still waiting for the engine. Kev said it's basically done, I think, so just waiting on Kevin to send it back from South Coast Rotary, and then yeah, then can piece it together and put it in the car. I still need to get Lexan for the side windows because I just keep on forgetting to do that. It's always hard to plan stuff and then find places that are open on weekends to go pick parts up and that. So yeah, sometimes this stuff can take a bit longer than expected sometimes. Have I done my cut and shut? I think. Yep, so I've already cut and shut the boost solenoid wiring, so the wiring's done, and I modified the crank angle sensor wherever that is. I think it's over here. I think we ran through that, so I don't know if I ran through all that or not, so let's run through that now. All right, so this is my crank angle sensor. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it's basically the sensor that tells the ECU the speed that the engine's moving in, as well as the position of top dead center in relation to the sensor. So normally what would have happened in this is that there's one magnetic sensor there, which works off the bottom wheel, and there was another magnetic sensor here that works off this top wheel. So what would happen is, engine obviously spins around, the bottom wheel with all those teeth is working out how fast the engine's spinning, and then these top two teeth would tell the engine where top dead center is, essentially. So what I've done is I've removed this magnetic sensor here, and I've cut a tooth off here, and I've cut a tooth off here, and what that now represents is basically these two teeth on that bottom wheel, and when it passes past this little magnetic sensor here, it knows in reference to, you know, how far away this gap is now based on top dead center. So this is now what you would call a 12-1 trigger wheel. So it's got 11 teeth, and then there's a missing tooth, which is the 12th tooth, and that's what will now be used as the reference for top dead center and RPM speed. And because obviously rotary engine has, you know, no camshaft, so there's no exhaust stroke and intake stroke, it's just moving around and top dead center, top dead center, top dead center sort of thing with the rotor. It doesn't need a separate, you know, home trigger, so to speak. It'll work like this completely fine. So why have I done that? Many people out here, many people have done this back in the day with ECUs where they were limited on inputs, and a lot of people still do it even to this day on some other engines as well, and they've reported that they've never had any trigger problems or anything. Not that I did have any trigger problems, I just wanted to count out any possible issue at all. So what this does is essentially it cuts down an extra avenue of failure. So now there's only one sensor, Yeah, so before there was 2 sensors. So if there was ever any issue with false triggers or anything like that, not that there was, because there wasn't, it would have been picked up in the data log and there never was, but this absolutely rock solid locks in that it can't have any trigger issues. Now, I think I posted this on Instagram a couple of weeks ago or something, and a lot of people were saying, put a trigger kit on it. I think, you know, I'm not been around rotaries for 20 plus years. I know what's out on the market, so thank you for the advice, but you can pretty much take it to the bank that if there's a rotary part that's made out there, I know who makes it and where it's made from and what it does. But the reason why I can't do it is because I actually have an FC timing cover on my FD engine, because that is how this mechanical fuel pump mounts. And the crank trigger on those mounts on the same mount as where my mechanical fuel pump is. So unfortunately, that off-the-shelf FFE trigger kit just doesn't work with my setup. And the trigger kit that a lot of people run here, which is the 12-1 kit, seems to work really well. Yes, it would be better to have the 36-1 kit because it's more resolution, so it's more accurate, but it would take a lot of custom work to make that work on this thing. So yeah, I do like the way the FC one works with the trigger pointing, with the sensor pointing, you know, in line with the wheel, not the one that sits behind it. So I don't want that style anyway, which I think is what they do with the FD style. It's also finished up this pipe now too. It's got a big mouth in the intake, which basically takes up all the open area in the bottom of the bumper there. And I've just put some mesh screen in there. Now, this is, obviously it's only a small pipe, it's 3.5, I think, or maybe even 3. This isn't being used for ram air, so that's why it doesn't step up or, you know, solidly mount to the turbo, because I'm not sure that, you know, when the turbo needs to ingest 50 PSI of that volume of air, that the 3-inch pipe, if it was hard feeding, it would actually be enough air to not compromise what the turbo is trying to do and the efficiency of the turbo. So all I'm actually using this for is feeding cold air to the turbo. So, which I know will do fine. I've already tested it. This mesh was like aluminium gutter mesh. It's really fine. This is not something I would actually put on a turbo. You see those sort of turbo guards or whatever they make, 2-star. I think they make one just to maybe stop really big rocks, and they make one to really fine mesh. I think those really fine mesh ones have been sort of proven to be a fair sort of restriction. So I've just got it here on the intake of this, and because I don't care where it's going off to onto the turbo, it's not like I'm going to be putting that mesh on the turbo side of it. So the only way the turbo can sort of ingest anything would be through here. So if that's blocking everything coming in and the air being rammed into it, it should be completely fine. But yeah, I'll have to paint all this stuff now and that to hide my awesome welding. It's actually pressure tested and leak tested everything with my leak tester, the smoke machine thing I've got. And as much as people want to always criticize people's welding online and that, there were absolutely no leaks out of any of that stuff, this stuff, or the my intercooler piping that I've made. So I always look at it that, you know, function over form sort of thing. It doesn't have to look absolutely incredible to be on Instagram to actually work. And I don't have the patience to sit here and weld for days and days and hours to get better and better. It's just my reality and I'm comfortable with it. So you might not be, but that's your problem, not mine. Yeah, overall, I think the only other thing I've got to do is my little idle air control valve here thing. So I'm going to weld these 2 bungs on here, and this is just a basic sort of Ford, forget what it's from, AU maybe, stepper, a basic sort of 2-wire idle air control motor. And the reason I'm doing that, I think we've been over it before, is essentially my car has very tight torque converter. It has an engine that makes incredibly low amounts of torque at low RPM and has really low engine vacuum. So to get it to idle nicely in park is okay. I can get it to idle around 2000 RPM and it'll be fine. But when you pull it into gear, because the converter's so tight, it lugs the engine down, and because it's making no torque, it'll stall it straight away. So there is, you know, when I'm shifting out on the track, you know, the shift points are about 1500 RPM drop. And I get that basically also with the auto in park. So when it's in park and I pull it into gear and load it, it wants to drop 1500 RPM, and about 900-ish RPM is the stall point of the engine. So anything under 900 in gear, it starts getting really cranky and not being overly happy at idle and wanting to stall. And the difference between like high 800s and 950 RPMs pretty significant. So what I'm hoping to do is lower the mechanical set idle control with the throttle body to be around 2100 RPM. And then with timing and fuel and the idle air control valve, I'm hoping that when I pull it into gear and the RPMs drop, that it's quick enough to catch it, stabilize it, and then raise it up to maybe about 1100 RPM in gear and not sort of stall or whatever. And so hopefully that's what happens, and that's the plan. But yeah, we can only test it and try and see how it goes. Yeah, because at the moment, I'm sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul with the idle control. We've basically got it set that in park it's idling at like 2500 RPM, and I pull into gear, and obviously it's a huge jolt because it's 2500 RPM, lugging it down to sort of what it is. It's a fair bit of load on through the gearbox, and you feel in the car. So I just want to also, 2500 RPM puts bit too much heat into the engine too quickly or whatever, so I just wanted to idle a little bit slower, a little bit more sedately, so it's not so much of a head case at idle, because it's yeah, revving its head off a bit at the moment. So get that done and I'll test that, see how we go. Realistically, the only other solution sort of is, I can't, now that people are going to say like, why does it have a drive-by-wire throttle? Well, if you look at many drag racing cars throughout Australia, you'll see that drive-by-wire throttle isn't actually legal in a lot of classes. It probably is in this, but I would have to make an adapter, make all the stuff, make it fit, redo all the piping again, redo all the wiring again, change a whole heap of wiring over, because the wiring would have to go, I'd have to take sensors out of the ECU and put them in the input expander and that, and it's just not worth it. If I can get this to work like this, it'll be hopefully fine. I don't know, we'll see how we go. Can only try stuff. That's what you can do. You can get out and try stuff rather than just hoping for the best. Actually go and test stuff. So that's what we're going to do. So last thing I've done here is we've got a master cylinder. This is an adapter plate, so that'll bolt on there. I've got to get some countersink bolts so I can put them in from the back and bolt it in, and then this will just bolt straight onto the firewall of the Mazda. And I've already checked the whatever the thing is that goes in there, the push rod, and we are all good. So again, another weekend job. I have to go get a whole heap of nuts and bolts, because I've got plenty of nuts and stuff in here, but in terms of bigger bolts, I'm missing a few. So yet another job. That's pretty much where I've got with most of the projects. So again, if you know anyone that has the wiring for this, please reach out. Also, if you're new here, or if you're just a casual viewer, just click the subscribe button. It's free and helps us grow. I think we're at 11,900 or something now, so it's great. But yeah, please, if you know someone with the RX4.0 project, reach out and see if they can get in contact with me. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you then.